Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
This one's gonna be a wild ride, even for us. We're exploring a conflict that's been brewing for a long time, a rivalry with universe-shattering implications. And you'll never guess what. It's all playing out right here, right now.
What's fascinating here is that our usual deep dive format, well, it's taken a rather unexpected turn. We're not just analyzing documents or theories today, we're witnessing a live confrontation between two major players in the roleplay universe, Bugsy Prime and Demoner.
Yeah, you could say things got a little intense when Bugsy Prime stopped by to drop off a basket of muffins. Apparently, that was the signal for Demoman to crash the party.
Yeah.
And now the Bugsy Council's here throwing down right in our studio. It's like our deep dives became deep dive.
From what we understand, Bugsy Prime has been anticipating this showdown for quite some time. His long-standing rivalry with Demoman stems from a deep philosophical divide, and it seems today's the day they're settling things once and for all.
Bugsy Prime is the leader of the Bugsy Council, a group he specifically formed to counter Demoman's destructive tendencies. The council is made up of some seriously powerful individuals, all related to Bugsy Prime in some way. We're talking about Dr. Megalo, the brilliant inventor, overlords, a master of dark sorcery, Antario, who fights using rhythm and sound. How cool is that?
And we can't forget Demonic, a crossroad demon with a knack for deals and chaos, Mr. B, a clone of Bugsy Prime with mastery over electricity, and Yankee B, a street fighter with incredible skills. It's a truly diverse group, each member bringing their own unique abilities to the table.
And here's the kicker. Each one of them is said to be powerful enough to take on Demoman individually. That's how serious of a threat Demoman is. But why is there so much bad blood between these two?
Their rivalry has a long and complicated history, rooted in Demoman's descent from heroism into a puppet of these incredibly powerful beings called Titans. He's consumed by rage and jealousy, constantly seeking to dominate and control. It's a stark contrast to Bugsy Prime's strategic and often protective approach.
It's like watching a classic battle between order and chaos unfold right before our eyes. Bugsy Prime, always thinking several steps ahead, versus Demoman, driven by raw emotion and destructive impulses.
One of the sources you provided details Bugsy Prime's attempts to reason with Demoman in the past. It seems there were moments when he genuinely believed Demoman could be redeemed, pulled back from the brink. But those efforts ultimately failed, leading to the formation of the Bugsy Council and the current situation we find ourselves in.
It's clear that Bugsy Prime understands Demoman better than anyone. He knows his tactics, his motivations, even his weaknesses. But there's this underlying sense of sadness in the sources, almost like Bugsy Prime mourns the loss of the hero Demoman once was.
It's a tragic element that adds a layer of complexity to this conflict. This isn't just a battle for supremacy, it's a clash of ideologies, a struggle for the fate of an entire universe known as the RPU.
And from what I'm gathering, Demoman's actions have had devastating consequences for the RPU. There's mention of a particularly disturbing incident involving the Covenant from the series Bible Black. But honestly, the details are pretty unsettling, and I'm not sure we need to delve into that here.
I agree. What's important is that Demoman's behavior has become increasingly erratic and destructive, fueled by the Titans who seem to be whispering in his ear, manipulating him for their own mysterious purposes.
Which brings us back to this chaotic scene unfolding around us. It sees Demoman finally made his move, interrupting our recording with a surprise attack. But Bugsy Prime, ever the strategist, was ready for him. He had the Bugsy Council on standby, and now they're engaged in a full-blown battle right here in the studio.
It's incredible to witness the council in action. Their coordination is flawless, each member anticipating the other's moves, and seamlessly countering Demoman's attacks. Dr. Megalo seems to have deployed some sort of sonic device, disrupting Demoman's movements, while Overlord's dark magic is creating a protective barrier around Bugsy Prime.
Antario's using his rhythm-based powers to deflect Demoman's energy blasts. I have to admit, it's a bit distracting trying to analyze this rivalry, while sonic waves and infernal chains are flying around us.
It's certainly not your typical podcast recording session, but amidst this chaos, we're seeing a real-world demonstration of the power dynamics we've been discussing. Demoman's reliance on brute force and Titan-influenced energy seems to be faltering against the coordinated strategy of the Bugsy Council.
It really does highlight the importance of understanding your opponent. Bugsy Prime has spent years studying Demoman's tactics, predicting his moves, and preparing countermeasures. It's like he's always 5 steps ahead.
What's fascinating here is that Bugsy Prime isn't just reacting to Demoman's attacks, he's actively shaping the battlefield. dictating the flow of the fight. He's placed his council members strategically, using their strengths to exploit Demoman's weaknesses. It's a masterclass in tactical thinking.
And speaking of tactical thinking, did you catch that? Demonic just opened up some kind of interdimensional portal and redirected one of Demonum's blasts right back at him. I'm starting to think these Bugsy Council meetings must be pretty exciting.
From the information you've provided, it seems Bugsy Prime has cultivated a deep sense of loyalty and trust within the council. They're not just allies, they're family, and they're willing to put everything on the line to protect him and the RPU.
Yeah. I've been wondering about something. We've talked about the Bugsy Council and Demonum's destructive tendencies. But what exactly is at stake here? What will happen if Demonum wins?
The sources paint a rather grim picture. It seems Demoman's ultimate goal is the complete domination of the RPU. He wants to reshape it in his image, a vision fueled by the whispers of the Titans.
The Titans. We haven't really talked about them in detail. What are they exactly? And what do they want?
The details on the Titans are a bit scarce, even in the more esoteric sources you provided. They're described as ancient, incredibly powerful beings, with motivations that are difficult to comprehend from a human perspective. Some speculate they feed on chaos and conflict, while others believe they seek to manipulate reality itself for their own inscrutable purposes.
So basically, they're bad news, and Demoman is their puppet. Okay, that's definitely something that we don't want happening. But if the Bugsy Council is so powerful, why hasn't Bugsy Prime already defeated Demoman?
There are a few key factors at play here. First, Demoman is constantly evolving, adapting his tactics, and drawing on the power of the Titans. He's a formidable opponent, even for a group as skilled as the Bugsy Council.
That makes sense. But what about Bugsy Prime's trump card, the super robot, J-Gami's T? Why hasn't he deployed it yet? I mean, if things are getting this out of hand in our studio, imagine the destruction Demoman could cause on a larger scale.
The Gami's T, a fascinating piece of technology, from what I've gathered. It's an incredibly powerful machine, capable of immense destruction. But Bugsy Prime seems reluctant to unleash its full potential. There's a sense of responsibility in the sources, a concern for the collateral damage that Jagami's T could inflict.
So he's holding back.
Yeah.
Trying to contain the situation without resorting to overwhelming force. That's actually pretty impressive, considering Demoman didn't seem to have any qualms about turning our podcast studio into a battleground.
It speaks to Bugsy Prime's character. He's not driven by ego or a thirst for power. He's a protector, a strategist who weighs the consequences of his actions carefully.
Hold on. I think something's changing. The energy in the room feels different. What's that sound? It's like a million wings beating.
It seems Theo, Bugsy Prime's wife, has decided to join the fray, and if the sources are accurate, her arrival could be a turning point in this fight.
Theo. You mean the same Theo who used to be the Phantom Blot? That Theo.
The very same. She's a being of immense power, capable of manipulating reality itself. Her decision to intervene suggests that even the Bugsy Council might be reaching their limits in containing Demoman's power.
Things just got a whole lot more interesting. But before we get swept up in the spectacle of this battle, let's take a moment to remind ourselves of the bigger picture here.
This conflict isn't just about Bugsy Prime and Demoman. It's about the fate of an entire universe and the forces that seek to control it. The outcome of this battle could have ripple effects that extend far beyond the studio, impacting countless lives within the RPU.
Wow, it's all getting very real, very quickly. And as Theo unleashes her power, bathing the studio in an ethereal light, I think it's safe to say our deep dive has just taken a turn for the epic. I've never seen anything like it. Theo's power is incredible. The whole studio is shimmering. And Demoman seems completely disoriented. It's like she's bending reality itself around him.
What's fascinating here is the contrast between Theo's approach and the more physical tactics of the Bugsy Council. While the council members are focused on containing Demoman's attacks, Theo seems to be targeting his very perception of reality. It's a subtle but incredibly powerful strategy.
It's definitely effective. Demoman's energy blasts are fizzling out before they even reach their targets, and he looks completely bewildered. It's almost like he's fighting against a force he can't even comprehend.
This highlights a key element of this conflict that we haven't discussed yet, the importance of the veil. From what I've gleaned from your sources, the veil is a sort of protective barrier that separates the RPU from other dimensions, shielding it from chaotic influences.
So you're saying Demoman's connection to the Titans might be weakening the veil, making the RPU vulnerable. What exactly?
That's where things get a bit speculative. The sources mention beings of immense power and chaotic energy existing beyond the veil, entities that could wreak havoc on the RPU if given the chance. It seems Bugsy Prime and the Council are not only fighting Demomans, but also holding back a tide of potential chaos.
That's a pretty heavy responsibility. No wonder Bugsy Prime created the Middleman Institute to monitor the Veil and anticipate these kinds of threats. It seems like he's always thinking 10 steps ahead, preparing for every possible scenario.
His foresight is certainly impressive, but it also raises the question of whether this constant vigilance takes a toll. Is there a point where the burden of protecting an entire universe becomes too much for one person to bear?
That's a good point. Even with the Bugsy Council and the Middleman Institute, Bugsy Prime must feel an immense pressure to keep everyone safe. It makes that whole incident with him building a giant BFG while drunk seem a little more understandable.
Indeed. It's a reminder that even the most brilliant minds need an outlet, a way to release the pressure. But even in those moments of apparent recklessness, there's a strategic element to Bugsy Prime's actions. The sources suggest that the giant BFG wasn't just a drunken whim, but a carefully calculated deterrent, a message to any forces that might be tempted to exploit the RPU's vulnerabilities.
Wow. So even his off time is strategically planned. I'm starting to think Bugsy Prime never really switches off. But back to the fight. It looks like Demon's finally started to push back against Theo's reality manipulation. He's focusing his energy, channeling the power of the Titans. This could get dangerous.
This is where Demoman's unpredictability becomes a factor. He's not bound by conventional tactics or logic. He's fueled by raw emotion and chaotic energy, which makes him incredibly dangerous, but also difficult to anticipate.
Oh, wow. That was close. Demoman just unleashed a massive energy blast. That nearly took out half the Bugsy Council. But wait, Mr. B intercepted it at the last second, absorbing the energy into his own body.
Mr. B, the electrifying clone of Bugsy Prime, it seems he inherited not only his creator's intellect, but also his willingness to sacrifice himself for the greater good.
That was an incredible act of bravery, but it looks like it took a lot out of him. He's down, and Demon's still on his feet. I don't know how much longer they can hold him off.
It seems we've reached a critical juncture in this conflict. Demoman, fueled by rage and the whispers of the Titans, versus the Bugsy Council, their strength waning, but their resolve unbroken. The fate of the RPU hangs in the balance.
This is it, folks. The climax of our very unscheduled, very intense deep dive. And as Bugsy Prime steps forward, a determined look in his eyes. I can't help but feel like the real battle is just beginning.
What happens next is anyone's guess. But one thing's for sure. The repercussions of this confrontation will be felt throughout the RPU for years to come. We'll continue to monitor the situation and bring you updates as they develop.
For now, we're signing off from what has to be our most memorable deep dive yet. We hope you found it enlightening. Despite the rather chaotic circumstances, stay curious, keep exploring, and maybe invest in some soundproofing for your next podcast recording.
Until next time, keep those muffins coming from a safe distance.
Of course,